Welcome back to WWE Frenzy, the only channel that gives you the unfiltered truth about what's happening in professional wrestling. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and smash that button right now, because after you hear about the absolute chaos that went down at the Royal Rumble, you're going to want to be here for every single upload. Make sure those notifications are turned on, because the stories we're breaking are the ones everyone will be talking about tomorrow. Roman Reigns chased Paul Heyman down the tunnel at the Royal Rumble, and the footage that leaked from backstage is going to completely change how you view their entire relationship. The Tribal Chief, the man who has dominated WWE for over 3 years, the undisputed champion who carried this company on his back through the pandemic and beyond, was seen sprinting after his own special counsel in a fit of rage that had security scrambling and producers panicking. This wasn't a worked angle for the cameras. This wasn't part of the show. This was real emotion, real fury, and a real fracture in what many believed was the most solid partnership in modern wrestling history. Let me set the scene for you, because the context matters here. The Royal Rumble was already shaping up to be one of the most unpredictable events in recent memory. Speculation was running wild about surprise entrants, potential winners, and how WWE would navigate the road to WrestleMania with so many moving pieces. Roman had a match earlier in the evening, a defense that was supposed to be routine, something to remind everyone that he's still the top guy despite all the challengers circling. Heyman was at ringside doing what he always does, playing the role of advisor, strategist, and occasional insurance policy when things get dicey. Everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. The match itself went according to plan. Roman won, retained his position at the top of the mountain, and the storyline progression seemed to be moving in the expected direction. But then something happened during the Rumble match itself that apparently set off a chain reaction nobody saw coming. Multiple eyewitnesses backstage reported that Heyman was seen having an intense conversation with someone from creative, a discussion that became heated enough that other people in the hallway started paying attention. Whatever was said during that exchange, it clearly had implications for Roman's future, and when the Tribal Chief found out about it, he absolutely lost his mind. The chase happened right after the Rumble match concluded. Roman came through the curtain, still in his ring gear, looking for Heyman with an intensity that made everyone nearby uncomfortable. When he spotted his special counsel near the production area, he didn't call out to him, didn't ask for a private conversation, didn't handle it diplomatically. He went straight into pursuit mode, charging after Heyman like a man possessed. Paul, realizing the danger he was in, took off running down the tunnel toward the parking area. Grown men in expensive suits were sprinting through backstage corridors like something out of an action movie, and the whole scene would have been comical if it wasn't so obviously serious. Now I need to talk about why this matters beyond just the spectacle of it. Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman have been aligned for years. Their partnership has been the foundation of the most successful heel run in modern WWE history. Heyman brought legitimacy, mic skills, and strategic thinking to Roman's presentation. Roman gave Heyman relevance, protection, and a main event spotlight he hadn't consistently had since his days with Brock Lesnar. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, complementing each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. For that relationship to deteriorate to the point of a physical chase backstage represents a seismic shift in WWE's landscape. According to sources who were present during the incident, Roman was screaming about betrayal, about loyalty, about promises that had been broken. Heyman was trying to explain something, yelling back that Roman didn't understand the full situation, that he needed to calm down and listen. But the Tribal Chief wasn't interested in explanations. He was interested in confrontation, in making Heyman answer for whatever transgression had occurred. Security eventually had to step in, not to protect Heyman from physical harm necessarily, but to prevent a situation that could spiral completely out of control in a public area of the arena. Let me tell you a story that relates to this, because it'll help you understand why these kinds of backstage explosions happen. Years ago, I worked with someone I considered a close friend. We had built something together, trusted each other completely, and I would have gone to bat for them against anyone. Then I found out they had been making decisions behind my back, decisions that directly affected my future, without ever consulting me or giving me a heads up. The betrayal wasn't even about the decisions themselves, it was about the dishonesty, the lack of respect, the violation of trust. When I confronted them, I felt that same white-hot rage that Roman must have been experiencing, that anger that comes from being blindsided by someone you believed had your back. The speculation about what triggered this incident is running rampant across social media and wrestling forums. Some people think Heyman was negotiating with another wrestler behind Roman's back, potentially aligning himself with someone who could challenge the Tribal Chief's position. Others believe it has to do with WrestleMania plans, that Heyman found out about creative directions Roman wasn't supposed to know about yet and either kept that information from him or, worse, was actively involved in planning something that would undermine Roman's status. There's also a theory floating around that this ties into the ongoing bloodline saga, that Heyman has been playing multiple sides and Roman finally discovered the extent of his manipulations. Whatever the specific catalyst, the underlying issue appears to be trust. Roman built his entire empire on loyalty, on the concept of family and the bloodline standing together against everyone else. He acknowledged his cousins, elevated his family members, and created a dynasty based on the idea that blood is thicker than water. Heyman was brought into that inner circle, given a position of trust and influence that very few outsiders ever receive. If Paul violated that trust, if he put his own interests above the tribal chiefs, then from Roman's perspective, it's not just a professional disagreement, it's a personal betrayal of the worst kind. The footage that leaked, and yes there is footage even though WWE is desperately trying to keep it contained, shows just how intense this confrontation became. You can see Roman's face, the veins in his neck bulging, the raw emotion pouring out of him. This isn't the cool, calculated tribal chief we see on television. This is a man who feels genuinely hurt, genuinely angry, genuinely ready to throw hands despite all the consequences that might follow. Heyman looks terrified in those brief clips, stumbling as he tries to maintain distance, frantically looking for anyone who might intercede on his behalf. I've covered wrestling for a long time, and I've seen plenty of backstage incidents. Most of them are overblown, exaggerated stories that get passed around until they become legends disconnected from reality. But this Roman and Heyman situation has a different feel to it. The people I've talked to who were actually there, who witnessed this unfold in real time, they all describe it the same way. They use words like genuine, scary, and unprecedented. These aren't wrestlers working everyone, this is a legitimate fracture in a relationship that was supposed to be unbreakable. The implications for WWE's storytelling moving forward are massive. If Roman and Heyman are truly at odds, if this can't be smoothed over with a conversation and some reassurances, then everything about the current direction needs to be re-evaluated. The tribal chief character has been defined in large part by his association with Heyman. The promos, the presentation, the aura of invincibility, so much of that came from Paul's contributions. Without Heyman in his corner, Roman either needs to evolve into something new or find another voice to fill that role, and honestly, there's nobody in WWE who could replace what Heyman brings to the table. From a business perspective, WWE has to be concerned about this kind of backstage drama leaking to the public. They work incredibly hard to maintain the illusion, to keep fans focused on the stories they want to tell rather than the reality behind the curtain. When something this explosive happens and word gets out, it undermines their control over the narrative. Suddenly, fans are more interested in the real-life conflict than the scripted feuds, and that's a problem for a company that depends on carefully managed storylines to drive viewership and revenue. The Royal Rumble itself almost became secondary to this backstage chaos. People who were there to enjoy the show, to see their favorite wrestlers compete for a WrestleMania spot, ended up buzzing about Roman chasing Heyman instead. That's not necessarily bad for WWE in terms of publicity, controversy generates interest after all, but it's definitely not the story they intended to be telling coming out of one of their biggest events of the year. Let's talk about Heyman's perspective for a minute because he's not just some random manager, he's one of the smartest minds in professional wrestling history. Paul has survived and thrived in this industry for decades by being strategic, by understanding power dynamics, by knowing when to make moves and when to lay low. If he did something that provoked Roman to this extent, there had to be a reason. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall, sensed that Roman's run at the top was coming to an end, and started positioning himself for whatever comes next. Maybe he was trying to protect Roman from a creative decision that would damage him long-term and went about it in the wrong way. Maybe there's a completely different explanation that we haven't even considered yet. The thing about Heyman is that he's always thinking several moves ahead. He's playing chess while most people are playing checkers. So even in this moment of apparent chaos, even while running down a tunnel trying to escape an enraged Roman Reigns, I guarantee you his mind was working on how to spin this, how to use it, how to turn a disaster into an opportunity. That's what makes him such a valuable asset and such a dangerous individual to have in your orbit. You never quite know if he's serving your interests or his own, and sometimes those two things align and sometimes they don't. I remember interviewing a former WWE creative team member who told me that managing the relationships between top stars and their managers or advocates is one of the trickiest parts of the job. Everyone has egos, everyone has their own agenda, and when you're dealing with people at the top of the card who have significant leverage, those egos and agendas can clash in spectacular fashion. They told me about incidents that never became public, arguments and confrontations that were smoothed over before they could become scandals. But they also said that sometimes things reach a point where there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, where the relationship is so damaged that the only option is to move forward separately. The question now is whether Roman and Heyman have reached that point. Can this be salvaged? Is there a scenario where they sit down, air their grievances, and rebuild the trust that's been shattered? Or is this the beginning of the end for one of wrestling's most iconic partnerships? Based on what I'm hearing from people close to the situation, it's going to take a lot more than a simple apology to fix this. Roman feels betrayed on a fundamental level, and that's not something that heals quickly or easily. For WWE's creative team, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that they had plans built around the Roman-Heyman dynamic, storylines that were supposed to carry them through WrestleMania and beyond. If that foundation is crumbling, they need to pivot quickly and find a new direction that makes sense. The opportunity is that real emotion, real conflict, makes for compelling television. If they can figure out how to channel this backstage drama into an on-screen storyline that feels authentic, they might have something special on their hands. The WWE Universe's reaction to news of this incident has been intense. Social media exploded with speculation, theories, and hot takes from fans who think they understand exactly what happened and what it means. Some people are siding with Roman, arguing that Heyman has always been a snake who was bound to betray him eventually. Others defend Paul, suggesting that he was probably trying to do what he thought was best and Roman overreacted. And then there's a third group who thinks the whole thing is a work, an elaborate setup for a storyline that will play out over the coming weeks. Personally, I don't think this is a work. The details are too messy, the optics are too chaotic, and WWE gains nothing from having stories leak about their top star losing control backstage. If they wanted to do an angle where Roman and Heyman split up, they'd film it properly, present it on television, and control every aspect of how it's perceived. This has all the hallmarks of a genuine crisis that the company is now scrambling to manage. The timing of this couldn't be worse for WWE. They're heading into the most important stretch of the year, the weeks leading up to WrestleMania, where every decision matters and every storyline needs to be firing on all cylinders. Having their top champion involved in backstage drama that's dominating the conversation is a distraction they don't need. They need focus, clarity, and everyone pulling in the same direction. Instead, they've got chaos, uncertainty, and a situation that could spiral in a dozen different directions. I've got to wonder how the other members of the bloodline are reacting to all this. The Usos, Solo Sikoa, the extended family that's been part of Roman's story for so long, they all have relationships with both Roman and Heyman. Are they being forced to choose sides? Are they trying to play peacemaker? Or are they staying out of it entirely, recognizing that this is between the tribal chief and his special counsel and nobody else needs to get involved? The dynamics within that group are complicated enough without adding this explosive conflict to the mix. From a performer's perspective, I can understand Roman's fury. He's invested years into building his character, his legacy, his position at the top of WWE. He's worked through injuries, through criticism, through periods where fans rejected him, to finally reach a place where he's universally recognized as the guy. To have someone he trusted potentially undermine that, to feel like the rug might be pulled out from under him by someone in his own camp, that's a nightmare scenario. Every wrestler's worst fear is being sabotaged from within, and if that's what Roman believes happened, his reaction makes complete sense. The corporate side of WWE has to be concerned about how this affects their plans. They've built so much around Roman as their cornerstone, their franchise player, their most reliable draw. If he's emotionally compromised, if his focus is split between performing at the highest level and dealing with this Heyman situation, that's a problem. They need him at 100%, fully engaged in delivering the kind of performances that justify his position. Any distraction, any drama that takes his attention away from the work, potentially impacts the quality of the product. Looking at the bigger picture, this incident raises questions about how WWE manages its talent relationships in general. Are there systems in place to address conflicts before they explode publicly? Is there a protocol for handling situations where trust breaks down between performers who need to work closely together? Or is it just chaos, with everyone expected to figure things out on their own until something becomes too big to ignore? Based on what we've seen over the years, I'd lean toward the latter, which creates an environment where these kinds of blow-ups are almost inevitable. The wrestling business has always thrived on drama, both on screen and behind the scenes. Some of the most legendary stories in industry history involve real-life conflicts that bled into storylines or backstage incidents that changed the direction of entire companies. Roman chasing Heyman down a tunnel at the Royal Rumble has the potential to become one of those stories, the kind that gets retold for years as an example of how personal relationships in wrestling can combust in spectacular fashion. As this story develops, and trust me, it's far from over, we're going to be following every detail right here on WWE Frenzy. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Roman was justified in his reaction? Is Heyman guilty of betrayal or just doing his job? Can this partnership be saved or is it finished? Drop your opinions below and let's have a real discussion about what this means for WWE going forward. Make sure you're subscribed because we'll have updates as soon as new information comes to light, and in a situation this volatile, things can change by the hour. Hit the like button if you appreciate the in-depth coverage we provide, and share this video with anyone who needs to understand the full scope of what went down at the Royal Rumble. This is the kind of content that makes wrestling fascinating, the blur between reality and performance, the genuine emotions that occasionally break through the scripted entertainment. Thanks for watching WWE Frenzy, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue to bring you the truth that others are afraid to talk about.